It's the Jordan flu game for Dakota. It is the 2025 LukieBoxing Awards show. It's going to be phenomenal. But before we get into that, we introduce Dakota. Dakota's fighting off something. Please don't hang out with Dakota. You might get the illness, but he will come to you remotely and give you a great podcast.
I'm going to do my best, guys. I'm just a guy doing his best today.
Okay, there we go. Naoya Inoue, the monster, he wins. He beats David Picasso. What are your initial thoughts?
Listen, I thought it was a great win. Picasso's a big, strong guy. And I thought Inoue gave him a boxing lesson for about 11 rounds. And then I felt like Picasso showed some real character in that 12th round and kind of out-hustled Inoue and hit him more cleanly, I think, than we're used to seeing Inoue get hit. And some of that, I think, was the grit of Picasso, and some of it was Inoue feeling like Picasso had nothing that could hurt him. And so he was willing to kind of just stand there and exchange a little bit. I thought it was a great performance overall, though. The jab was beautiful. You know, the footwork, the people don't talk about Inoue's footwork enough, it feels like, because it's such a big part of his game, the way, you know, he's able to change direction, the way he moves around the ring. I think he also figured out pretty early that while he's moving, that Picasso's not going to punch. So it was easy for him to kind of get out on the perimeter and kill time. And I thought it was a good win.
With you, some notes I took on Inoue. One of the best fighters at timing other fighters ever. I'd say him and Dimitri Bivol do the same move, but in exact opposite styles. Bivol probably loads up on none of his punches and kind of fences you, and he takes that half step back and throws a right hand. The one issue I have with Inoue is everything's hard. It's like there's no setup punch. Everything is like break a building punch. Really good reflexes, but his ability to take the step back and catch you with a shot really is magnificent to see. I have one other thought, but the other thought I'd want to say is it's rare that you see someone, to me, that's pretty clearly like not in their prime, who's still like a Hall of Fame level boxer. Like the prime Inoue was probably like 2017 until the Fulton fight.
This is where I maybe disagree. Is I think as opposed to viewing him as past his prime, I look at it like he cleaned out these lower weights, and as he's moved up in weight, it's harder for him to look as dominant, right? So at 108, 112, 115, even 118, a lot of times he's lighting guys up early. He's just too strong. He's getting these early knockouts. And then as he's moved up, guys can take him rounds. He's gotten put on the deck a couple times. And it's like when Lomachenko cleared out featherweight, when he cleared out 130 and moved up to 135, I think there was people that were like, oh, he's past his prime. But really, he was just fighting bigger guys where the terms of the fight were different. And so he would get dropped by Linares, but he would still get a stoppage, or, you know, he would have these moments of vulnerability. And sometimes it felt like that was more about the size of who he was fighting.
I think that's the chicken and the egg argument. There'll be some people that think that. I think it's also, for me,
it's also maybe both, right?
Well, and I think also it ties into what made Inoue so special. Is like Jamie McDonald, to me, was one of the most underrated fighters, and this guy comes and knocks him out in one round. Just beating guys that you looked at as potentially the best fighters and stopping them in 1 to 2 rounds dominantly. And it's like, you know, I'd say the last time we really saw that Inoue was Fulton. And then you could make a devil's advocate. Well, who is Fulton at a world-class level? We're not really sure yet. Outside of the 122 Fulton, it's kind of an up and down guy. But to me, like, this isn't quite the same Inoue. And it's still like when you watch it, you realize this is something different. Another thing about Inoue that I think will probably catch up to him at some point, defense is an afterthought. It's like he's so offensively minded. At times he will get caught with stuff just because he takes risks to look for the stoppage. You know, like there's guys that are, you know, it feels like that's probably, there's going to be a moment where that catches up to him. But I mean, as a fan, you have to appreciate someone that's forcing the action.
I mean, it might catch up with him, but he's fought so many great fighters now, and it hasn't caught up with him. That and listen, I think he's more slippery in the pocket than he gets credit for. You know, it wasn't like Picasso was having a hard time tracking him. Well, he kind of was actually when Inoue was on the move, but there was plenty of times where Picasso was in punching range, and like if you're really sitting and watching, he would throw 5-6 punches, and he was working so hard and not really getting much out of it. And Inoue does get hit because he's an offense first guy, but I think he's slicker in the pocket than maybe guys think when they get in there.
Yeah. Now let's go to the next fight. Junto Nakatani, Sebastian Hernandez. Pretty much the first fight Nakatani's had that's been very difficult for him. He moves up, he fights Hernandez. Whenever you fight someone who's 20-0, 18 knockouts in the lower weights, you know you're not going to have just an easy night. I think the startling thing for, well, actually, one thing before we go to that, how do you feel about kind of this saga with Inoue of people bringing up this friggin' hand wrap thing? Because before this, there's like he had to rewrap his gloves before the Fulton fight. They're talking about the wraps. I mean, to me, I just want to say my piece. It's like there's this fighter who obviously has generational talent, and it feels like a way for some people to undercut like a legacy of a fighter based around the way he's taping his gloves, which I'm unless someone can prove it to me, I don't think it's making a dramatic difference in the outcome of the fights. But some people are talking about that more than the fights itself.
I've got to be honest, bro. I'm kind of unfamiliar with the issue. I've never, I've yet to hear about people having issues with Inoue's hand wraps.
That's amazing,
that
but that's
feels
also
like an
you
issue.
not being on the internet.
Yeah, I'm not an internet guy. I'm a boxing guy, as you know. That's not something I've heard about, but it does feel like outside of Antonio Margarito and Luis Resto, that issue has been used as a way to discredit guys. I mean, Fury and Wilder, the amount of, conspiracy shit that I heard coming either from Wilder or from people online about why Deontay couldn't beat Tyson Fury. It feels unless, like you said, Lukie, unless you have something concrete, like that doesn't really do it for me.
Well, just to me, it's like you have this guy who in the lower weights is starting to become an older fighter. Traditionally, this is an era, an age range where you become an older fighter. And this is like, okay, David Picasso struggled to separate, but he showed up. He was as good as we've ever seen. And Inoue does his thing. And now people are like, going back to this hand wrap thing because Picasso's team made him rewrap his hands. And it just seems like, this is a pretty special fighter.
But Lukie, if they made him rewrap his hands, wouldn't that mean that his hands were wrapped properly?
Well, yeah. But I mean, I think it's just like there's also like how many, this is inside boxing, but how many times do guys I've talked to guys, or maybe you're in the gym, go, if we can make them rewrap their hands, maybe that'll throw them off. Like part of that behind the scenes that I think the fans don't get is guys are looking for advantages. And it's not always about, is this unjust or is this unlawful? It's, can we get this rewrap just to see if that messes with the energies, makes people feel discouraged, changes the body language. I think that for a novice fight fan or even an experienced fight fan that hasn't been backstage, they think that there's something inherently like bad going on. Whereas I think it's more so, hey, you can't do that. And the inspector goes, oh yeah, you can't do that. Rewrap it. And it's like this really mundane, subtle thing. What we might have to do is get Mike Basil or a hand wrapper, a guy that wraps hands, and have them break down the issue, because it's probably a non-issue. It's probably a very boring, small thing. And I just want to address this because I feel like there's going to be some people that that just bring this up over and over. We got a comment. I've never seen this. Alex Alberto. Can you say that?
I'm gonna go Alex Alberto G 644.
Okay. Hey, Lukey and Dakota. According to Ring Magazine, Inoue is the first undisputed champion since Larry Holmes in 1983 defended the belt 4 times in 1 year. He's my boxer of the year. Awesome. Well, we will get to that.
I think that's a very fair argument, by the way. And just to add to some of what you're saying with the hand wraps, one of the I'm going to make the connection here quickly, don't worry. But one of the things that has frustrated me about Jake Paul's presence in boxing is it's brought some new internet people over, whether they like him or not, that are more casually willing to suggest or say that fights are fixed, or that guys are cheating, or that there are
just strong opinions, strong and
unhelpful and evidenceless opinions about what's going on behind the scenes, when you and I know the sport has corruption issues that you can prove. I don't have to go make shit up.
But I think that like a lot of times people go to corruption and it's just like things like incompetence or things like, people get lazy. I think that also because of the history of boxing, people quickly jump to corruption and not sadly, but oftentimes the answer isn't that intriguing. People aren't that organized. It's normally, like judges' scorecards. I think sometimes bad scores are people like an action fight, and it's a hard, close fight. Like an example is the next one we'll talk about: Junto Nakatani, Sebastian Hernandez. Nakatani outlanded, I think, Hernandez in 8 of the 12 rounds. There was a 118, 110, or a 117, 111 card. I mean, 8 of those rounds, if you're counting, can go that way. And then you say you favor in a swing round 2 times Nakatani, you're at 10-2. Is it a great card? I don't think so. But that's how you get to that outcome. And I think a lot of people go, oh, man, there's a super fight on when I think the outcome really is there's a path.
Sure. And I think, and we can switch over to Nakatani here, but my point was simply just that as internet culture that Jake Paul and I would say Ryan Garcia have kind of led into boxing as like a mainstream piece of boxing, saying things like that, oh, he cheats with the hand wraps, saying things like, oh, the Tyson fight was fixed, he's pulling his punches. Like, to just be able to say things like that casually without having anything to back it up, I think has not been helpful.
Yeah, it's a weird time in boxing. Junto Nakatani, Sebastian Hernandez, what are your thoughts?
I thought it was a great fight, man. Like, Hernandez, I was thoroughly impressed with Hernandez's volume. I know the centerpiece of the conversation is going to be around like Nakatani's shortcomings, but I thought that the volume that Hernandez was able to keep up while getting hit clean by a big puncher was incredibly impressive. The fact that he won a lot of rounds down the second half of the fight was really impressive. I thought the fight was a draw. I think a lot of people felt that way. I guess the part for me that was surprised was that Nakatani didn't necessarily have a plan B, because he's just or maybe he's gotten so used to hurting guys. He's like, if I just keep landing clean shots, at some point this guy's going to back off, and that didn't happen. Some of that may be like, I feel like it's the first time I felt like he looked like the smaller guy in the ring, right? At 112, 115, even 118, because he's 5'9", 5'10". He's generally like towering over these guys. He's got bigger legs. Like, everything about him physically has been advantageous at lower weights. And this was the first time he really did look like a smaller guy in there. And Hernandez was able to capitalize on that. And I was a little surprised, especially down the back end, by the lack of snap in Nakatani's shots. I think some of that was the body work from Hernandez. There's no way this doesn't damage the fight with Inoue. I mean, I think that's unavoidable. The best way to put that fight together, obviously, is that you have 2 dominant guys. Who's the best? Right. And now I think that's kind of the waters on that have been muddied by the fact that, well, maybe Hernandez is just as good. Right. So then it's like, are you really getting the 2 best guys? And that's, again, the Al Sheikh model of double and triple announcing fights, I think, has been flawed from the start. And he seems.
Well, when
I've
you
heard
double book fights, you're always going to get in trouble, right? When you
you did a great
fights,
video on that yesterday, and I think that it's an important point to make, that in boxing, but I also think it makes it look like there's an agenda, right? So when the one judge, like the only judge that had it 10 rounds to 2 is the Saudi judge, looks a little sketchy. You know what I mean? Because the
and more
agenda
the
is
like the optics of that, and then we have to say, more than likely it isn't sketchy, right? Like more than likely it's probably just a guy enjoyed the work of this other fighter, but when a fight's and another fight is booked in the future, things just get weird. And that's the thing, right? So then it leads into
it might
things
not even be intentional, right? But if everything you're hearing is that, like, judges are people too, and they get invited to stuff, and the relationships can get a little weird. And if everything you're hearing is that the reason and purpose for this event is to match Nakatani and Inoue, I think that there can be a tendency to not want to disrupt that.
or that at times maybe you don't have experience and it's
Experience is big.
round, and you go with the more known fighter because you're like, he must have done the better work. There's different, and this would be a great conversation if someone like Jack Reese wanted to come on our program to talk about how maybe that's what we'll do this year, how there's implicit bias and how you enter fights and how you have to be aware of different levels of bias and what could happen and all that. Because I think the hard part about this is when you double book a fight, it was either Inoue or Nakatani was going to have a hard fight. It's just the way it is. I think that for me, I'm the rare person where it makes the fight more interesting because I think that fans are going to be more divided than ever on this fight. I'm pretty sure Nakatani beats Inoue at this point. I'm pretty confident in that. And I think there's another group that thinks completely the opposite. And I think it's kind of interesting whenever you get a matchup where you're going to have two pretty expert opinions that are completely different. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Well, I mean, that's a perfect example because I think I view that as I would say a clear win for Inoue. I didn't see the sharpness and the snap from Nakatani in this one. And I think over the course of a 12-round fight with a guy his own size, that Inoue would win that fight, not easily, but I think handily.
Just think that it's a styles make fights thing, and that Hernandez showed that there's a level of durability that's going to give Nakatani a problem. But I think that the way Inoue fights, he's like a hybrid. He's not reckless in how he comes forward. And that timing-based style, I think, is going to play into Nakatani, who I honestly think does what Inoue does, but just better than him. I think he's kind of like the next evolution of what Inoue is, and he sets his shots up a little more. He uses different speeds. So I think it's just going to be one of those moments where people are like, I don't like this fight. I don't know this fight. And then I think it's going to shock people. I think it's exciting. But at the same time, it also makes me wonder why didn't they just make this fight in March? Because this Inoue fight really went under the radar. It happened during the holiday season. This Nakatani fight went under the radar. And then on a deeper level, and I know people want us to get to the awards, without the ESPN deal, like how relevant is Japanese boxing going to be in 2 to 3 years? Because it already feels a half a year in.
And if you're not going to do it in Japan, it's way less relevant. If you're going to do Japanese boxing outside of Japan, it's not as relevant.
But I mean, that's one thing. But at this point, like wherever the fights land is where they land at this point. The big thing I'm saying is we're a half a year without easy access to Japanese fights that we can watch at, like, to the point we were where we got our passion for Japanese boxing during this great era.
Right.
And now a half a year in, I'm seeing only the most hardcore of hardcore are watching these bouts now. And
another pay-per-view only adds to that, right? It only limits, this is a $40 pay-per-view. And DAZN and Al Sheikh have been promising, hey, we're going to get rid of this pay-per-view model pretty soon here. And it just doesn't happen. So when you get it off ESPN, you limit people's access to seeing it. then you double paywall it. You know, you're not putting Japanese boxing or boxing in the best position to be seen.
Other things on this card, Kenshiro, your guy, his fight got canceled. The champion Garcia fell ill at the ceremonial weigh-in. Sad stuff. It sounds like him and Andrew Maloney will meet next. So Kenshiro not vying for the title. You know, that's disappointing because he probably would have had like a fight of the year type fight. He always does. It's tough to see him not getting it. Erdison Garcia defeats, I can't say the guy's name. Do you know the name of the fighter that he beat from Japan?
His name is Taiga Imanaga, and that was a very impressive performance from Garcia. I really thought Imanaga looked sharp early, and Garcia kind of just stayed with it, dropped him late in the fight, and edged it out in a fight that I was a little worried maybe he wouldn't get the decision on it because it was close. But the knockdown ultimately, I think, separated him.
Speaking to the corruption in the sport, right? No one talks about this decision happening, but then 2 fights later, people point out the Nakatani or the very next fight. It's like, oh, but Nakatani. So, I mean, it's like we can't pick and choose. Like the sample size has to be the full card. And like if there were going to be like, why is this one get it? You know what I mean? And I mean, look at punch stats, etc. And then, you know, Tasumi gets a win to start the card. Let's go to our boxing awards, Dakota. Let's start it off. What are your thoughts for Boxer of the Year?
Well, I think it's very difficult for me to it's always been tough for me to say that the fighter of the year would be a person that only had one fight. But it seems like it's difficult to not give fighter of the year to Terrence Crawford, moving up 2 weight classes, beating a generational talent in Canelo, and then retiring after. It's tough to beat that, I would say.
Well, I mean, I think the notables I would say is, you know, you put Dimitri Bivol in there, a win over Better Beef, but then completely disappeared. You know, his box rec is probably going to go inactive again at the rate that he's going. Jesse Bam Rodriguez, you know, 2 good wins this year. I think that what hurts Bam is he's so dominant and people don't have the connection to the fighters he's beating that it's harder for him to get the award if he doesn't fight 4 times. I think Inoue's in the running, but getting dropped in a fight, you know, just subtle things. I think it's hard to give it to him. I think it's funny that him and Crawford kind of have had years where they both could have won fighter of the year. And Inoue tends to be like the writer's favorite over Crawford because he's fighting more often, etc. Because I thought that when Crawford beat Spence, he deserved Boxer of the Year over Inoue just because that was a generational defining win. I'm of the same belief in this. I just think moving up 2 weight classes to fight one of the best guys of the era, super fight, and do it pretty dominantly to outbox Canelo. It's really like a risk we don't see. I think him and Usyk have, to me, defined this decade. Maybe Inoue a bit, but to me, when I think of the 2 fighters that, to me, define the era, it's Crawford and Usyk. And part of what they do and that's so special is they've kind of taken risks and they haven't looked for A-side advantages. They haven't looked at traditional weight classes. How do I benefit from this fight? They've just kind of done legacy moves. And to me, and I get Inoue did that. Inoue did it more 2018, 2021. I think he's kind of stuck at his weight at this point. But to me, this is just Crawford's second time winning this award with Usyk in between. And it's kind of, I don't know, it kind of sums up his career, right? He gives you these brilliant performances, yet in his mind, what more can he do? Because it's like, the fans want a little bit more activity, but then at the same time, when you beat a Canelo, you know, that's pretty dominant. So that's kind of my spiel around this. Maybe I missed one other fighter who should be nominated, but to me, I think it's kind of a no-brainer for Crawford.
Listen, I think that there's like an off argument to be made for Lamont Roach, who was clearly coming in on the B side against Tank Davis, and probably won that fight, gets a draw, moves up another weight class to fight Isak Cruz, who's a top 7 guy at that weight, and maybe even won that fight as well. I think there's definitely an argument for him. If you want to talk about like individual wins, it's not as significant, but I think you could talk about shock. There are multiple other fighters that I think that you could at least consider for fighter of the year this year. But the generational significance of Crawford's win, again, that my biggest critique of Terrence was always activity. Like, how do you get people to keep caring? Same with Thurman. How do you get people to keep caring about your fights if they forget about you? But when you have a win like that, it's tough to forget.
Alex said Bam beat 2 undefeated champions. Very true. I mean, Bam is like, he's like, it's just one of these moments where it's like, it's just tough to have a great year when a guy moves up and fights like one of the faces of boxing and beats him pretty dominantly. It's just kind of hard for me to ignore that, because would you say Crawford beating Canelo was the most culturally relevant moment of 2025?
Culturally relevant?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we made a boxing book and we said 2025, that's probably the photo that goes with the year, is something that encapsulates that moment. I think it's the most telling moment of the year. It defined the year.
I would hope so. I have a feeling, depending on who you ask, that maybe Jake Paul might be that.
We're talking real boxing guys. We're talking the people that are in here. This would be something geared for us. This would not be geared for the consumer. And the thing that Lukey rant, I get that a lot of things now are about numbers, but if you ever grew up reading books or listening to music, when did you ever look at how many viewers does this band have, or how many records do they sell? And did that always reflect the artist that you liked?
Right. Why the fuck would that matter to me?
But it's like a lot of times now we're like, look at the level of viewership this person has. Look at the status. And it's like, I guess that's the gift of social media. People used to rebel against that. I want to be the underground. I want to be the most hardcore that speak to a niche audience. And now it's like, I want to be an influencer. I want my social media to validate my existence. I want to have this huge following. And it just seems like over past 7 years, really, we've seen kind of a rebellion from that. And I think probably our next decade is going to be like nihilism, where people are like, I have a social media, but I don't even use it. I want it as like as a phone number. I just want it like that. But I just think that's kind of interesting.
Everyone's going to get like Dakota and, become a little bit of a Luddite.
Floyd and Bivol arguably beat Canelo better than Crawford, in my opinion. I mean, you can make that case. I think that the reason I'm so impressed with Crawford is he fought Canelo at 168 pounds and moved up and took a major risk that would have potentially changed the way we looked at his legacy. He put, yeah.
No, Alex, I think you have a great point. I think that it's an easy argument to make for Bam being fight of the year. I'm also of the opinion that the Canelo fight was close. I've watched that fight twice now. I don't really understand the argument of Crawford dominated, that he won 10 rounds. There's a lot of those rounds where Canelo's just banging him to the body and there isn't a lot of offense from Crawford. And I think when somebody is boxing effectively and using good footwork, there's a tendency to not pay attention to some of that body work. That was a fight for me that Crawford won in the last 2 rounds. I think it's a 5-5 fight through 10. And he had more dig down and was more resourceful and had more things to go to. And for me, that was the difference in an all-time great win. I didn't see it as this, and I still don't. And, I know other people who have watched it too that don't see it that way. I just don't see it as like this boxing lesson that I think fits a narrative better. Yeah,
I saw it as like 9-3 Crawford. I just did not see it as a close fight. And I've seen it a couple of times. That's just, we see different things.
Yeah.
I saw it as 9-3, 8-4, but like very, very wide.
8-4, I think 8-4, I think is in reality.
But 9-3, 8-4. But like I feel as though Canelo was never in the fight per se. Like I feel like Crawford took the fight out of him in the first half.
Yeah, I did not see it that way. I thought it was very much a live fight until the end, and I felt like Crawford really did pull away. I think that's maybe what we do see similarly.
Women's Boxer of the Year. I can read our category nominees. Kind of lazily wrote them out
while I run to the restroom real quick.
Well, I'll just go with who I think it is, and as much as I'd like to give it to Mizuki Hirota, who fought 4 times this year, defended her title 4 times. Big January fight. I believe it was her U.S. debut in January, and then fights 4 times. Always fun to see people that do that type of stuff. But my women's fighter of the year is Elif Nur Turhan, Turkish fighter, and 3 basically 50-50 wins, all by knockout. In March, Shauna Brown, I had seen her fight January 7th, I want to say, of last year. She fought on the Jay Apataya undercard against David Naika. Interesting, like she won a split decision against a solid opponent, and I'm like, okay, this is a player in the division. Gets knocked out in 45 seconds on Before the Bell. I go, okay, that's interesting. Disappears, see an X post where she won in France, won in someone else's hometown in 130 pounds, and then ends her year winning the title, a lightweight title, and defeating Beatrice Vieira, who I think that me and Dakota had kind of tabbed as one of the special fighters of the era. And really what stood out about all of her performances, we haven't seen the same level of physicality, meanness, and punching ability in women's boxing that Turhan brings. The Turkish fighter, when she gets going, she's throwing a level of, I'd say, hostility and meanness that is not traditionally associated with women's boxing. I think a lot of the disconnect for people with women's boxing is the blows sometimes aren't telling, and that the fight can't change at any moment. And what intrigues people the most about this fight, or about Turhan at least, is she's a bit novice in her approach. She's throwing fastballs, like Dakota said, they're slow balls. And when she lands, it's game-changing power that alters a fight. So for me, I'm curious if you have a different one, but 3 basically upset wins, all by knockout, and winning a world title. I think Elif Nur Turhan is the winner of Women's Boxer of the Year for me. Dakota, are you there, or did you freeze?
I did for a minute. I think I caught the majority of what you said, and if we're thinking about the same fighter, it's the woman that knocked out Beatrice Ferreira a couple of months ago. And it's tough to not view like some of her skill set is a little bit, but there are things that she does in terms of her physicality, and in terms of, Lukie said, at times in women's boxing that individual blows don't necessarily have the potential to change the tone of a fight, and she clearly has some of that. And there's a recklessness and a relentlessness to her that is uncommon in women's boxing. And it feels like, because she's free swinging so hard, that at some point she could land a shot that changes things. And listen, I think another person that at least deserves some of that consideration is my girl Shadeja Green. I mean, I think her win over Savannah Marshall is one of the most significant wins in women's boxing this year. And the comeback that she's orchestrated in the last 2 years since losing to Franchon Cruz-Dezern and having a mental health crisis following that, I think has been fantastic.
Also in the chat, Alex said Clarissa Shields got 2025 for me, dominated Perkins and Lane Daniels. She fought the best available. I mean, Clarissa is one of the best out there. Other nominees, Katie Taylor, as I said before, Mizuki Hirota fought 4 times this year. Shadeja Green had a good year. Evelyn Bermudez, I believe, knocked out, who is the Sarah Bailey in 1 round. That's a good win. Maylee Flores Romero had an excellent year and picked up a belt. So some really good fights in women's boxing. Now let's get over to our fight of the year. So fight of the year, what stood out to you, Dakota, as the best fight in 2025?
I mean, there was a couple. I got to be honest, though. I've watched a bunch back, and the one that hits me in the gut is Abes Barao against Yoenis Tellez. I know that there's going to be higher profile fights, but when I think about a fight that had me on the edge of my seat from bell to bell, and the fact that Barao was not favored, and it was a little shocking to see Tellez get hit so much. To me, that was the fight that had me the most locked in personally.
We're seeing Eubank versus Ben 1 in the comments section. So the ones that maybe we love our British fans. Ones that I circled before I give away mine: Kenshiro versus Akui. Might be Kenshiro's last great fight too. That's like a little context. It might be like his last legendary great night. That might be like the.
I think he's gonna have some. I think that Kenshiro, as much as you know how I feel about him, I always feel like he's been a little overrated, but I think that he's a guy that's going to have some legendary losing efforts later on here, meaning he's going to get in with guys that people are going to say he's got no chance, and I think he's going to put up a fight.
Buatsi Callum Smith is on this list.
Banger.
Obviously Isaac Cruz Angel Fierro is on this list. Lamont Roach, Gervonta Davis, more so for the historical context and living in the moment. The WTF, is this really happening? Better Be Bivol, just in terms of a great fight, but probably not as rewatchable as fans want. But
I gotta tell you though, Lukey, I rewatched that one not too long ago. I've been sick the last couple of days, plenty of free time. That's like one of the, if you're like a boxing nerd like us, that's like one of the best fights I've ever seen, just in terms of skill.
I mean, it's one of them. The thing about those two fights are it's nearly perfect fighters who are coming in tremendous physical condition. And it's like two nearly perfect fighters in all regards facing each other. And I don't understand how people don't have the guys ranked next to each other on the pound for pound list, which is another argument, because neither guy fully separated. They're 1-1, and it feels like two draw fights to me. And that's kind of, to me, what I think is really what stands out to me is just how even everything about it was.
There's rivalries where guys are made for each other. I felt that way about Canelo and Golovkin. And I think that Better Be and Bivol are very much that way as well.
So my fight of the year is Lester Martinez, Christian and Billy. It kind of encapsulates everything I want from a fight of the year. Unhinged, crazy. And Billy just starts like a madman, goes fat. And I think this is a key element that we should move on for all years about fight of the years. Unhinged moments. So guys, both fighters have to have flaws, and typically one guy's flaw in the beginning is exploited, and then as maybe the guy tires, another guy's flaw is exploited. So like Lester Martinez doesn't throw a ton, but he looks to land counter punches. That's set up for Billy to work a lot. When Billy starts to slow down, all of a sudden Lester's counter punching is way more effective because Billy is looking to still work. And it created this back and forth nature where both guys got their licks in because of the flaws of the other. So for me, I feel like that was the fight that stood out.
I think that's a great pick. I think another one like worth consideration is Nakatani Hernandez. I know it's a little tough because we just literally watched it yesterday, but I mean that, and just in terms of an action fight, was incredible.
Okay, now we're we're trying to be all encompassing and do women's fight of the year along with it. Shorter list for me. Kay Scott, Olivia Curry 1, Chernika Johnson, Amanda Gallet, and Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano 3. With any other fights stood out to you in 2020? I actually, you know what? I'm wrong. The best fight I actually saw all year that was a women's fight. Let me give you the bout, because I slipped on my research department right now. It's May Lee Flores Recario against Navarino Romero, and it was on Pro Box TV in May, and that is one of the best fights you can watch.
I don't think I saw that one, bro.
Well, go back and watch that fight card, because that is just a banger of a back and forth women's boxing fight. And that's partially what this is built for, right? January's a little slow. People maybe didn't watch boxing all year. You come and type in boxing podcast awards, and then you find some fights or stuff that you want to watch.
Listen, I think it would be tough to put Taylor Serrano 3 as fight of the year because it was so dominant. If anything, I think that would be an argument for Katie to be fight of the year in the same way that Terrence was, is that in this great rivalry that in, her third go at it, when both fights were really flip a coin, that she just completely, pulled the trigger and found herself to be at a completely different level than Serrano just by taking a different approach. I thought it was brilliant.
Okay, we'll go on from that. Round of the year. What is your thought on round of the year?
Yeah, Lukie, unfortunately, I got to lean on you for that. That's when you really got to do some research on. For me, the last round of the Hooney Wardley fight would be what would stand out to me just off rip. But I got to lean on you for this one.
So for me, I've been sitting on this one all year. I feel like it's a deep nerd cut. Sebastian Juarez, DeMarcus Layton, round 1. DeMarcus Layton drops Juarez in the first round. Juarez is deducted 2 points, nearing disqualification. And then Juarez comes back and drops Layton 3 times, getting a walk-off home run. It might not fit the bill as world-class fights, but I think that a fight that has both fighters knocked down, point deductions, and a stoppage all in the same round merits my round of the year.
That's a great pick.
I just have been sitting on that all year just to be expert guy.
There was another one too that I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was like a knockdown round, and then the guy comes back. I'll think of it at some point, maybe even when we're off air.
Trainer of the year. Who do you give it to?
I mean, listen, bro, I could give it to Robert Garcia every year. Like I just see the consistency in his work, and you see how great Vergil looked this year. To me, Robert's the best in the game, and I think it was a great year for him and his stable.
I wrote him down as one of my picks. The thing is, and I did a video about this, best fighter of the year, I think, goes hand in hand with trainer. So if I'm giving it to Crawford, it's going to be Bomac. If I'm giving it to Bam, it's going to be Robert Garcia. I think it's a hand-in-hand award. I think that the winner, the best boxer of the year, the trainer should be rewarded for that. Other mentions, Shingo Inoue for the work with Inoue, Rudy Hernandez for Junto Nakatani, Lamont Roach Sr., who I think really burst on the scene, Yuri Tekchenko, I believe is Usyk's coach, and Mark Ramsey, who I think really had a sneaky good year, especially with the Arslanbek Makhmudov win. I think a lot of people didn't favor him to do well in. I think Bomac or Robert Garcia is the right answer there.
To me, then it's most certainly Robert, because as much as you could say Terrence was the fight of the performance of the year, we're talking about Vergil, we're talking about Bam, we're talking about some of the best prospects in the game. So the volume of fighters that are having success under Robert Garcia, I feel like, is unmatched.
Well, let me get my guy Bomax back here. He led Keyshawn Davis to a world title. He got Lester to a world-class level where he arguably possibly beat Billy in a fight of the year type bout. Troy Isley has had the most success in his career working with Bomac. And I'm probably forgetting a fighter or two that they're working with that's doing good things. So to me, it's like both teams are doing pretty darn like
that's no slight on Bomac, by the way. I'm just appreciating Robert's work.
We got to get through these boring awards so we can get to the fun ones, right? Knockout of the year. What stands out to you, Dakota?
I mean, it's tough to really do better than Norman and Sasaki, right? Like that was just a super memorable one. I feel like, you know, Frank Martin's knockout over Bartolome is probably not going to get selected by anybody, but that was a shocking, you know, Bartolome, you know, people are not knocking that guy out. So to see him just get leveled, head bounce off the canvas, you know, that was a good one to me. There's been some gnarly ones. There was one on Pro Box a couple years ago, or a couple days ago, that I'm forgetting the names of the fighters.
Marlon Harrington against Brian Polanco. I had to send it to you the minute it happened.
Yeah, that is right in the mix, bub. I mean, there's no way it isn't.
For me, it's Norman knocking out Sasaki. And I think the big thing too for me, and I said this in a video, the context that came with it, you know, if Norman didn't have these devastating knockouts leading into the Haney fight, people wouldn't have seen it as a competitive fight. And that knockout really altered the perception of Norman. And I think that should factor into an award, is that he had such a devastating knockout that people were like, this guy's going to stop Devin Haney because look at what he just did. And I think that is what a great knockout does for people's career.
Well, and listen, I think that was like pretty fair point to make in context. Haney had been really struggling down at 140 pounds, struggle against Ramirez at 147. And there you have young Brian Norman coming off what we are considering knockout of the year. And that's part of what made it such a great win for Devin. Again, he's another guy that you could kind of throw in the mix for fighter of the year as well.
Yeah. Now we're going to prospect of the year. Some names that I just threw in there. Yuta Sakai, I'm really high on him. Tomio Tsuboi, Japanese fighter who he stopped Carlos Quadros in his third fight. Pretty impressive. Jahai Tucker, Albert Chop Chop Gonzalez, Amari Jones, and Joshua Pagan kind of jump off to me as kind of guys that are contenders, prospects that stand out.
I mean, for me, it's Jahai. When I think about any of those guys in terms of kind of who's like a fully formed guy that's ready to step up to that next level, it feels like that's Jahai. And the fact that his record is imperfect, you know, he really has been taking tough fights for the majority, if not all, of his career. And, you know, when I think about young, promising fighters, I think he's right up there with any of them.
I think for me, it's Albert Chop Chop Gonzalez. Also kind of the same. He's just at featherweight, fighting a lot of contender level opposition. He feels like he could be in the title mix as soon as next year. Those
all
two
guys comes down to Top Rank, right? Like Top Rank also has all of these promising prospects that we just haven't been able to see for the last 6 months because they don't, you know, have a streaming deal.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but to me, Chop Chop is one of those special guys. Let's answer a few questions. What did you guys think of Usyk Fury fights? Well, that happened in 2024, and those fights were awesome. Dakota, what did you think of those fights?
I mean, there's some of the all-time great heavyweight matchups. There's very few matchups in terms of significance or rivalries in terms of significance at heavyweight that you could match with those two fights, and I think that they are proof, you know, that Alexander Usyk has a seat at the table with all the legends.
Yeah, especially the first fight. The second fight felt like Usyk just kind of really played the hits and won it pretty clearly, but that first fight really felt like an all-time classic. Like it felt like a legendary night. Jay Apataya, KO of the year. He might have two of them. We're going to get into Jay Apataya and these different awards, the Lukie Awards that I've written up. I'm really trying to get us there. So that's prospect of the year. Now we're kind of going to the Lukie Awards. This is the award show that I want to do. Maybe next year we'll just do the Lukies. But I feel like people want the regular ones. What's the story of the year in boxing this year?
Man, why don't you lead off with that one, bro?
What the hell's going on? I think the story of boxing is inconsistent fight schedule. Where are fights to be found? Where do we get our fights from? What is a pay-per-view quality fight? What is a main event? Sometimes the main events are like these phenomenal fights. Sometimes they're not. I think that it's like the story of 2025 was, what is boxing at a world-class level? How is it consumed? And who are the major players? I think to me that was the major story. It felt as though we're gonna look back and this is the start of a new era. You look 10, 11 years back, it was the start of the PBC era, was 2015. Kind of felt like a reset from that era where there's new players entering. The PBC is no longer new. It's now an established player, that boxing fabric. The story for me was just kind of like, where is boxing going? What is the status of boxing? And then I guess for me, the story, because the story of boxing that I follow the most is not what probably most people follow. I like watching prospects and contenders. Where do I consume those type of fights? Where do I consume that stuff? Where do I watch contender bouts, prospects? Is it going to be mostly Pro Box TV? Is it going to be this, as Alex says, Zuffa Boxing, which he says is the story, and Dana White's takeover will be the story of the 2030s, the next decade? Very well could be, but I think the story to me is like, Top Rank doesn't have a network deal. I never thought I'd live in an era where that happened. What does Golden Boy look like this year? What does Matchroom look like? What does American boxing look like? What is British boxing? What is regional boxing? I think that's the story for me.
Yeah, I think the mystery of the future is kind of a great way of putting it. I've never felt, I'm just going to be brutally honest with you and with the people who watch it. I've never felt more strange about the state and condition of boxing in the 20 plus years that I've been involved in this sport. It feels very directionless. It feels like the incentives have gotten really strange. It feels like Dana White and Zuffa as an entity coming in and trying to, alter something that provides protection to fighters before they even throw a card. Top Rank not having a streaming deal. The only, really like meaningful in terms of elite boxing cards being behind multiple paywalls. I mean, boxing is not for the working man, right? Like
it's not a growth potential sport right now. They're like, how does the sport grow? It's like, you don't like, we're gonna finish this, I'm gonna do my workout, and then I'm gonna watch some football. If you have some form of a television subscription plan, you watch football on Sundays. Boxing, you don't just accidentally fall into. I don't know our origin stories with boxing, but my origin story, besides my family watching it, is every now and then it was just on TV and you get stuck. You go, oh, boxing, cool. And it feels like, maybe that I feel this way about movies too, but at least on streaming platforms, you can kind of like go, oh, I remember that movie, I'll put it on. There's no just like accidentally stumbling across something. And it seems like the cultural relevance of boxing has never been smaller or more irrelevant. Is this on me? Am I the problem? But anyways, that is kind of that. That's this. Dakota, I'm hoping that's Dakota that is having the issue, because if that isn't Dakota, then we're in a whole world of hurt. So that is the story of the year. Let me text Dakota. And then the awards I was looking forward to doing, it looks like I will be doing by myself. Let's see. We hear you. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it. Dakota's back in the chat. We're moving now on to one matchup we want to see in 2026. You go first, Dakota. One matchup. Oh, Dakota's frozen, it looks like, again. So he's got the crazy internet. So I will go with the one matchup I want to see, and I want the chat to chime in. The fight I really want to see in 2026 is Vergil Ortiz versus Boots Ennis. And I know that's kind of a trendy pick. It's not a very exciting, it's not a very nuanced take, but it's two of the best fighters of an era. It would kind of start a new-ish modern era, I feel. It would be exciting. It's contrasting styles, I guess you could say. Ennis is more of a boxer puncher. Ortiz is a pressure fighter who boxes. Really exciting matchup. I think that we can come up with numerous matchups I'd like to see that are really, really exciting. I think Oshaki Foster against someone that we deem a 50-50 fight would be a really exciting matchup to see. I think seeing some middleweight fights of meaning, seeing that division getting stronger. David Benavidez against any top fighter would be exciting to see next year. Shakur Stevenson kind of trying to go for the pound for pound number one. Those are all things that I'd like to try to see. But really, my top of my list is Vergil Ortiz versus Jaron Boots Ennis. Now we go to the next one. I was so excited to do this with Dakota. I thought we were going to have fun, but I guess I got to do this. I kind of knew it. I kind of knew that I was going to be all up by myself on this one. We're going to call this the Mystery Men. Mystery Fighter of the Year. And what I mean by that is this is the fighter that disappeared. Oh, let's see. Alex said, I want to see Usyk versus Wilder. The most shocking knockout of the decade will happen. Bomb Squad. And if that happens, that would be something, man. I just think that, Wilder hasn't looked like that same guy since the Fury fights. I think that took something out of Wilder. And Usyk, at least to me, maybe I overrate him, but he's a generational great. Let's see how Dakota's doing. Dakota, what's the fight you want to see in 2026?
Well, this was actually, I think, an overarching point that I hope that at least hardcore boxing fans can start to have a little bit of imagination and remember that they can want good fights. I think that the promotional walls of boxing, and now, that the structure of the sport seems to be such that it's either big fights or it's pro box. You can want Agit Kabayel versus Fabio Wardley. You're allowed to want good fights like that. You know what I mean? You can want Diego Pacheco versus Hamza Shiraz. There's good fights that if you have a little imagination, you can want those matchups. It doesn't mean that you're going to get them immediately, but I think that boxing fans, not the new generation of fans, but boxing fans need to start having a little bit of imagination. They can want Takuma Inoue versus Juan Francisco Estrada. They can want those kinds of matchups, and I hope that we just see some of that type of thinking a little bit more. I want to see better Bivol 3. I know Bivol's got his injuries, but that's what I want to see. Those matchups still very much exist, and I think it's on boxing fans to remember that they can want nice things, that they don't just have to settle for a shit sandwich every time.
So what nice things do you want to see in 2026? What's the one fight?
If I had to pick one fight, and listen, this is me being put on the spot. I put zero thought into this. I would love to see Usyk and Agit Kabayel. I just think that Kabayel has more than earned his spot. He's gotten devastating knockouts over top heavyweights. And to me, with Crawford retiring, Usyk is the pound for pound king. Me putting zero thought into it off of my gut, that's the fight I want to see.
Okay, now we're going into one of my favorite categories. We'll call it the Mystery Men. We'll call it the guys that disappeared category. Guys that disappeared. Off the top of my head, Blair Cobbs, he was going to return December 20th, had to withdraw with an illness, I believe. You came up with Bryant Perella last week, Dimitri Bivol, and Errol Spence Jr. Who just completely disappeared this year?
Well, it felt like all of those guys definitely disappeared. Listen, here's a great one. My buddy Richard the Vibes Van Sicklin. He had some tremendous fights a couple of years ago and just has been out of action. And I couldn't tell you why or exactly what he's doing or what he's up to, but he's certainly not in the boxing ring.
Okay, we got to keep it moving. We're going to do illegal maneuvers, and I've been wanting to do this, so we're banning a move from boxing on this program. My illegal maneuver is the Canelo silencing the haters after the Golovkin 2 fight. When you're fighting a developmental level opposition, especially a guy with a losing record, it is now banned according to LukieBoxing's podcast. You cannot do the shush sign. You cannot knock the guy out and run to a ring apron and do the shush like people were doubting you leading up to the fight. And you can't do that during the weigh-in at a regional club show. We are no longer allowing people to do that. And I think we're going to score the first round a 9-9 if people perform this. It's going to be a point deduction on our scorecards if people do this move.
This is my one right here. And I believe we've talked about this before. If you were going to bring a rapper to the ring with you, they can't have the vocal tracks on the fucking tracks. That's definitely my rule. If you're going to bring a rapper out, they have to rap. You can't just be that double voice lip syncing shit. Because it, first of all, it just sounds terrible. It's basically fucking useless. And it looks goofy.
Also, I'll add a rapper one. If you are one of the early fights on a card, it's now an illegal maneuver to bring a rapper out. So if you're one of the first 3 fights on a major card and there's not really many people in the arena, let's maybe wait until you're on the main card.
Yeah, that's definitely a fake it till you make it move. And preferably if you bring a rapper in, let's not have him be like a well-known informant. How about that?
Well, but like that would be a double whammy if you get the vocal track and it's the under thing. So here's a category I'm really excited to introduce. It's the Fabio Wardley guy who came out of nowhere award. And I'm going to award this to Fabio Wardley. So it's the Fabio Wardley guy who came out of nowhere and had a good year award. The award stems from someone that we would not have talked about last year on a year-end show. And then they just have a miraculous year that's, incredible and historically relevant. It probably changes the way we look at their career. And it feels like every year there's a guy that comes out of nowhere. A few years ago, this award would have gone to Hector Luis Garcia. And obviously these type of guys probably don't win Boxer of the Year, but it feels like we need a guy out of nowhere award. So the guy out of nowhere award, I am naming the Fabio Wardley guy out of nowhere award until someone has a better year. What do you think of first the name? And what do you think secondly of who is getting the award?
I think for me, the kind of like guy out of nowhere award might even go to Lamont Roach. Not that he wasn't notable prior to this year, but he was a top 5, 130-pound guy. He was not anywhere near like a pound for pound kind of conversation to me. There didn't seem to be any indication that he was going to move up in weight. And then I think to move up in weight, be the B-side and beat Tank Davis, even though that's not what happened on paper. And then to move up another weight class and maybe beat Isaac Cruz. I know he went 0-2 this year. But for me, I didn't necessarily expect that was the trajectory of Lamont Roach's career. To me, it looked like the big fight was like maybe him and Shock, right? So I didn't necessarily view him as a multi-weight star type of fighter. I viewed him as a very competent, skilled champion that didn't get a lot of knockouts and maybe wouldn't get the kind of attention that he's gotten this year.
So is it the Lamont Roach Jr. or the Fabio Wardley guy came out of nowhere? Or are we just taking the name out of the award and waiting?
I think either of those guys' names would be appropriate, as much as I say all that about Lamont. Obviously, there wasn't really a world where I conceived that Fabio Wardley would beat Joe Parker. I just didn't really see that coming at all. So there is an element of like, that did come out of nowhere. And I didn't really think he'd be Inoue.
To me, it's like the reason I go Wardley is I just thought that Lamont had a style to give Tank problems. And I always said that. And I kind of saw where that was coming from. And with Wardley, it's like I thought he'd lose to Hooney or it'd be close. And then like he wins in this miraculous knockout win. And then the Parker fight I thought was a mismatch and he wins that. It's like, okay, now he's like arguably the second or third best heavyweight in the world. I mean, I never saw that. I thought he was going to be the guy that the really good fighters beat. and now he's arguably one of the most dangerous guys in the division. So I've taken out the name. So it's the guy who came out of nowhere award. We got to wait and give it. Now our next category is the hey, they had a good year, but we don't have an award for him award. So I think this is the Bam Rodriguez, David Benavidez, Lamont Roach category, where
Good Job Bub award.
The good. Actually, I think that's the new name, the Good Job Bub award, where it's like you did everything we wanted of you, but it just, it didn't quite work out. Who gets the Good Job Bub award?
It's got to be David Benavidez for me, man. I mean, that win over David Morrell, arguably, one of the best fights of the year as well. We didn't even talk about it in the fight of the year conversation, but I think it belongs in that conversation for sure. And listen, I think that David's just a tremendous fighter, and I think it's another great year. 2 quality wins for him. Obviously, the yard fight is less significant than the Morrell win, but I think those 2 wins cumulatively, he definitely gets a Good Job Bub from me.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. If Apataya fights Noel and Benavidez beats Sordo, does Benavidez duck him in 2020? I don't think Benavidez ducks anyone. We have never seen Benavidez turn anything down. So Rolly came out of nowhere. He beat Ryan Garcia and he might knock out Pacquiao. But I think that like Rolly's always been a person who was either overrated or underrated. And it just so happened Rolly was being underrated. I also think that he kind of has Ryan's number. If you look at that sparring, I know people go sparring's different. He did a number on Ryan Garcia. And sometimes when you spar a guy tough, there's lingering damages into those fights. So I like what you're saying.
We talked about this almost 2 years ago. Everything about that Devin Haney fight kind of looked like it's all going to get worse for him after this, because he was just such an unhinged, out of control person that I don't think you can rely on.
So now we go to my next award. This is one that might tie over. The lost all momentum guy. We always have the lost all momentum guy. Ryan Garcia might be that guy. He's back in a big fight. My front runner is my guy Jay Apataya. I thought that he'd actually be in the running to be like one of the biggest stars this year. I forget he fights now, and I don't even know how to watch his fights, which is unfortunate. Maybe US centric here, but did Moses Atuma lose a little momentum? Feels like a stagnant year. So no Moses Atuma. For me, I think this is Jay Apataya's award. I think he lost all his momentum in 2025.
I got to give this award to the entire Top Rank stable, unfortunately. Just an abundance of talented guys, be it Troy Isley, Keyshawn Davis. I could go on and on and on. We just didn't see any of them outside of Michaela and Inoue in the back half of 2025. So the dozens of talented fighters at Top Rank, if we want to talk about whose momentum slowed down, it's that stable of fighters.
Okay, the breakout fighter in 2026. Who's gonna be in the running for Boxer of the Year this time when we do a show next year? December 28th, 2026. Just open some sick Christmas presents, holiday presents. Who is the fighter we are talking about as one of the best of the year?
It's so hard to predict, right? Because of all the things we talked about, where the direction of the sport is so unclear. Who's going to be able to be active? Who are we going to be able to watch? Who are we even going to be aware of if they do something cool or significant? To me, that's all a little up in the air.
So the people that stand out to me, obviously Vergil and Boots are some names that stand out. Shakur Stevenson, Junto Nakatani and Inoue stand out, and David Benavidez and Bam Rodriguez. I think if you pick one of those guys, there's a chance that that's one of the names. I think those are the ones that I'm circling as the biggest names in the sport by the end of the year.
Can I say one more fight that I would love to see next year?
Yes.
And again, a personal bias very much included. I want to see Clarissa Shields and Shadeja Green. I think that, I understand the Franchon fight, but that's a fight that's already happened. Franchon hasn't been active since the Shadeja fight, and Shadeja's picked up 2 world titles. So it does feel like I think it feels like an easier task for Claressa, and people say she's fighting the best available fighters, and I don't know that I agree with that anymore. I think this is the best fighter available to her, and I think it would be a very significant fight in 2026.
Got a text message from the work guys. Love a good work guys podcast question. Final, let's end with Amanda Serrano. She fights this Saturday, Puerto Rico. Puerto Rican homecoming. Featherweight unified champion taking on Renee Tellez. Bit of a saga. Our guy, Ryan Sangala, wrote a great story on Boxing Scene about Erica Cruz, her team unhappy with her being pulled from the fight. There's a form of like an adverse finding or an atypical test result that merited her being pulled from the fight, and Renee Tellez now entering in on short notice. It's a bit of a strange matchup because of the late sub, probably because of the time of the year, to get someone who's in shape around the holiday season, basically cutting weight around New Year's and Christmas and holidays, etc. That said, is there any concern? Because the story for me about this fight is Amanda Serrano, the scar tissue, the scar tissue from that fight with the second Taylor fight. It felt like that was part of the story in the third fight was she doesn't commit the same because she thinks about the butts. Is this the year where Amanda Serrano might slow down a little bit and people are just going to look at this as, veteran, one of the best women's boxers, which she is, fighting a 22-year-old or around 22-year-old aged fighter, good amateur. Is there a chance we see just like a really crazy upset a couple of days into the year?
I don't know. I don't know enough about Tellez or what she brings to the table. I do think Amanda has accumulated a lot of punishment over the years, and she just suffered the most one-sided defeat of her career. I think it'll be interesting to see what the rest of her career looks like and how she responds, not just to losing. We know how she responds to losing, but to the type of loss that, she's coming off of.
Yeah, I think that this is potentially it's going to go one of two ways. It's either going to be oh my God, this fight is going crazy, this is a competitive fight, or we're going to go experience matters. Tellez took a step up that she hasn't experienced yet as a pro, and, she'll learn from it. But like, I don't know. I can't really put a grasp on it. In the co-feature, Stephanie Hahn puts her women's lightweight title on the line against Holly Holm. For me, the story of this fight, and a big story guy, the story is quite simply, can Holly Holm at age in her mid-40s, basically, can she win a belt? Stephanie Hahn is fine. She's solid. But I also think that she's somewhat of a vulnerable lightweight women's champion. She's not like when I look at all the champions, Alif Noor Turhan, Caroline Dubois, I don't really single her out as like one that I'm like, this is imposing force.
Yeah.
I look at this fight and go, sometimes really special, great fighters are capable of doing things late in their career. And I'm wondering, does Holm have one more great moment left in her? That's my question.
Always tough to know with a fighter that age, right? I mean, but I thought for the position she was in, I thought she looked pretty great in that last comeback fight this year. But Hahn is competent, right? And she's younger. And I think just being competent, being able to throw sharp shots, depending on where the mid-40s fighter is at, that can be enough to win.
I think there is a level of intrigue for me in this fight. I'm not saying I'm going to be engaged all 10 rounds, but I definitely am going to have this on for at least the first 2 or 3 rounds, because I think there is a level of like a good novelty. Does Holm still have it? She was a women's boxing pioneer. She gave us one of the biggest sporting moments of the last decade, knocking out Ronda Rousey, which went viral. And now she's kind of trying to become a 40-year-old champion, which isn't very common. I'm not even sure if I'm sure there's been a women's boxer who's, Cecilia Brækhus has been a 40-year-old champion, but I don't know how many there have been. So that's a novelty. And then I think one more fight worth noting, Jonathan La Bamba Gonzalez is taking on Yankiel Rivera. And Yankiel Rivera, I think you and me both love the way he fights, but there's a little bit of his emotions get the best of him at times. And he's prone to brawl and make fights competitive. He's coming off that Cordova fight, which was a draw. La Bamba Gonzalez, his last fight was, I think, to Anthony Alagasca. There's been weird kind of, it ended in a weird way, ends in a stoppage. I'm curious to see this fight as well, because La Bamba was a guy maybe 4 or 5 years ago was seen as one of the better lower weight fighters. Yankiel Rivera, I think, is one of the better lower weight fighters currently. He needs a win like this, but there is a focus issue at times. And this is one of those veteran tests that I think isn't interesting at this point in his career.
And there was just like a non-adjustment in that Cordova fight, man. That was the big thing for me. You know, Cordova, it was ugly, and frankly, it was pretty rudimentary stuff that Rivera just never made that adjustment and never like found his way to separate himself in a fight against a guy who just didn't have the skill set.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit troubling because it's like me with the New York Times crossword. Sometimes I'm trying to fit the wrong words to make things work. You were expecting an operator of the skill and craft of Rivera to find solutions in the ring, and instead it looked like he wanted to match him with brute force and power. And I think that was kind of a lateral step, if not almost a disappointment for me, because I wanted to see a bit more separation in that bout. And I think it makes this fight more compelling. I don't know how you view La Bamba Gonzalez, but to me, it's a little more compelling.
It's definitely compelling, but then he has questions to answer too. You know, I think when you get brutally knocked out, it's interesting to see how, you know, you recover from that as well. He went from being a dominant guy at 108 to, you know, getting laid the fuck out. So it's two guys that are tremendous fighters that have had good careers, that are in a rockier moment in their careers and have questions to answer.
So then we look at the rest of the card. You got Jean-Paul Riviera, Henry LeBron, Ebony Bridges, Elise Soto, and various other kind of developmental talents. Alexis Charpo is on the undercard. The matchups don't really stand out to me, but the fighters are notable and they're worth being aware of. Like someone like Henry LeBron kind of fits the Landolfo Delgado top contender, not quite getting the move to a title fight yet.
He was a little bit of a Houdini this year, no?
I think that he might be the ultimate one. We might have missed that one. I don't think he fought once since beating Pitufo Diaz, which is not the greatest. But yeah, I mean, I think the undercard, I think this is kind of a top-heavy event, but I think that the main fights are interesting, and then we follow it up. Well, are you going to be back next week, or is next week when you start your sabbatical?
Next week will be my last my last show.
I guess just full transparency for those that love the show. Dakota, you know, work has pulled him away, so he's going to be gone from the show for a month. It's okay. He'll be back. We're going to start 2026.
Not going anywhere. It's all temporary.
Not going anywhere, but we're going to start 2026 with him, as we should. And then we're going to get some guest hosts who are going to fill in. It's big shoes to fill. And then he'll be back probably around the Super Bowl or around there in the US. And, you know, maybe he'll have some observations from a different perspective about the fight. Sometimes not having to do a show every week helps you have a better perspective. So curious to see how Dakota does, but we'll be back next week. And then when you look at the schedule, it's like you got Sabril Matias versus Dalton Smith. You got Eget, KBL. We're going to have some fights, but we're really building into getting to that Shakur Stevenson, Teofimo Lopez fight. But there's some interesting fights, and I think it's going to be a more promising start to the year than last year. Last year, I remember the first major U.S. card was like an El Toro Promotions card in Washington State, was the first U.S. card, and I watched it on a YouTube stream. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but like 3 days into the new year, we're getting an MVP card on DAZN. You know, it speaks to something. So I'm quite excited to start the new year, and I'm excited to do more shows with you. Any chat questions, be sure to say that. Those will be 3-minute fights. I don't know the answer. You know, it seems like MVP is very high on the idea of women's bouts being 3 minutes and 12 rounds.
I would just really love to see a 12 2-minute round women's title fight. I don't understand why we have to do these extremes of 10 2-minute rounds, which is 20 minutes, and 12 3-minutes, which is 36 minutes. It feels like the first step towards that equality is just making the same number of rounds, and let's see how that goes. We haven't seen anybody try that.
I think that also, like, it's a funny statement. How about the experts weigh in? How about women's boxers just tell us what they want to do, and we do a poll, and then that's what it is. You know,
listen, a lot. We've had women's fighters, you know, from multiple perspectives. I don't see why those, but to some extent, I don't think these are things that should be up for negotiation. I feel like a title fight should be a title fight. And as we start to figure out like what's appropriate, I hope we can kind of nail that down so that we don't have 36-minute title fights and we also have 20-minute title fights, because those are two different things.
Yeah, it's just a weird time in boxing, but that is our last show of 2025. Thank you for everyone that listened. Thank you to the podcast listeners. Thank you to those that subscribe to my newsletter. Thank you to those who read Dakota's writings on boxing. Thank you for those that support the channel. Who knows? Maybe we will be back. No, we probably won't be back, but it's been a great year. Dakota, do you have any send-off? You get to finish the show today.
Ooh, a lot of pressure, but I do, as much as the sport is, like I said, in my view, in as strange and uncertain a place as it's ever been, we definitely appreciate that the hardcore fans come and kick it with us for a couple hours every weekend. So shout out to the third host, Lukie. Always a pleasure working with you, brother. And we'll see you next week.